this is what I've noticed. I think maybe it's a particular UK thing, I don't know, is that people are much more tolerant of one than the other. People will tolerate a lot of harm done. They will not tolerate weirdness. Like that tends to be what's punished.
That's
like
fascinating.
Weirdness is understood as social harm. And people will put up with a lot of tacit violence in order not to be made uncomfortable. Not us, obviously, because we have autism, but other people.
Right.
So that's my secret cap. I'm always uncomfortable.
Welcome to Neuroprovocateurs. I'm Pam Shaffer. I'm a therapist, musician, and professional yapper. So that's me.
I'm Laurie Penny. I'm a writer, a screenwriter, and a journalist and an author, which are just lots of different ways of saying writer.
Those are many appellations for writer. I like that.
So you've got a thesaurus. Well done. That's what it means.
I've never heard it with that emphasis. Is that...
What do you say? Do you say thesaurus? Thesaurus.
Exactly.
Thesaurus.
A thesaurus?
A thesaurus.
I mean, that does make more sense, but it sounds like a dinosaur name, like thesaurus.
It does. Yeah. Maybe. Yeah. Now I'm confused. Maybe I've got it wrong. I'm just going to say that's the British way.
I was going to say you could pass it off, like an English teacher of mine passed it off as pomegranate.
Amazing.
And I was like, stellar. Like, she was Australian. And I was like, okay, sure. I guess that's how Australians say pomegranate. Pomegranate.
Look, I used to think it was jalapeno. Yeah, well, look, I'm not from a place with spice.
Is that like chipotle?
People didn't know how to pronounce it. Chipotle.
Oh, no.
Chipotle?
Chipotle? What did you call it? Jalapeno. Jalapeno. But we're here to talk about neurodivergence.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like anybody listening to this pod, just sight unseen, well, sound unheard, could probably have guessed that by now.
I think that maybe they picked up on our really subtle cues.
Without even listening to the first bit during which I was explaining my very specific gaming special interest for an hour while you kind of nodded and went, I like you as a friend.
I do think that is amazing that we came here to talk about neurodivergent social cues versus neurotypical and who's responsible for which. And we started it off with an hour-long warm-up about live action role play.
Yep.
That completely tracks.
It tracks a lot. It does. And we were going to talk about, it was who gets to be weird, I think is the theme,
yes.
Right?
Yes, and who gets to be weird. And also, I was really, when I read what you were writing and then I listened to the pod, which we can link in the show notes, what struck me was also there's a difference between weird or anachronistic or unusual and then also something that causes harm to others. Yes. And that was one thing I noticed in the pod that a lot of the people were saying, especially people who are autistic, were saying, please don't throw us under the bus for this one. Yeah. There's a difference between, I missed that cue and I'm sorry, versus ignoring when someone says this caused me harm and continuing to do it. Those are very different things.
Absolutely. And this is what I've noticed. I think maybe it's a particular UK thing, I don't know, is that people are much more tolerant of one than the other. People will tolerate a lot of harm done. They will not tolerate weirdness. That tends to be what's punished.
That's fascinating.
Weirdness is understood as social harm. And people will put up with a lot of tacit violence in order not to be made uncomfortable. Not us, obviously, because we have autism, but other people.
Right.
So that's my secret cap. I'm always uncomfortable.
The skin suit always is ill-fitting.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm autistic and British. Ask me how that's going. But yeah, the amount of harm people will tolerate in order to not upset the status quo for the status quo. Sorry. And you saw that with the Me Too movement. Like people,
right.
In order not to challenge people who they don't want to be uncomfortable challenging, in order not to make a fuss, like they will put up with and normalize an awful lot of horrible stuff and see people completely evicted from communities, industries. But I'm talking about like victims rather than abusers here, because that's what was happening before, and still is happening. The way you deal with violence, and particularly male violence against women, is you just sort of edge those crazy girls out of it, and right. Nobody says anything. And that is certainly more comfortable for everyone, apart from the people getting edged out.
Well, and thinking about what you said about UK versus, like, I think about US culture, and in a way, there's a certain amount of, like, I wouldn't say necessarily weirdness, but like idiosyncrasy and anachronistic behavior that's driven towards like individualism that's actually valorized here. And so that's actually seen as a positive thing. If you're like, but also it's very gendered, where if it's like, just like this odd, successful, creative man. And so then like the harm is often minimized, but it's interesting that like that weirdness is simultaneously valorized.
Yeah. We have that. I mean,
so it's a different dynamic.
Like, you're right. I would say, because I've asked around about this a lot, like with all the love in the world, Pam, you're one of the most Californian people I've ever met. I say that with love.
What possibly gives you that impression? I have like my water canteen. I have my like cold brew canteen. I'm sitting in like my music studio, like looking at a palm tree out the window. My beachy. This is literally like how my hair dries. Like I am.
Your beads. Like it's Actually, honestly, I think like Californians and British people are very good for each other. Californians should all go to the UK. British people should go to California. It's good for us. But like
I think so.
I also love New York for different reasons, because New Yorkers are very blunt, and there's that sort of like weedy individualism as well, but it's sort of like faster. People will just tell you if you did something wrong. They will yell at you, because that's New York.
Yep, we're in California. Have you like reframed? Like, have you thought about like maybe a different angle?
No,
like...
I don't want to. I came back and now I know about star signs, and everybody hates it so much. But yeah, no, seriously. But I have been told that so the places I have mainly lived in America are the places that people go to as well. But I'm told that there are a lot of similarities between British culture and, say, like Southern Christian culture in some ways. That sort of nice, the place where people say things like "bless their heart."
I was gonna say, I would say Southern culture, and even in some ways, my experience of a good friend of mine who was born in like outside of Boston, so like small northeastern town. But it's very much a like, don't stand out, stay in your place, stay in your lane, don't complain. And if you say like ascend higher, you're like a traitor to what you grew up with. And so it's more rigid. Yeah.
I mean, class and race are complicated in America because they overlap in different ways. And like we still have the very much in many ways the kind of the cultural class system, which is what America was meant to be rebelling against back in the day. How's that going? Sorry, it's insensitive of me. But seriously, it was faces. Oh God! But this was like back in the day, like it was considered liberation. That's how you got to like ship hundreds of thousands of your working class overseas so that they could become white people and have that little bit of power. When America imagines freedom, it's specifically freedom from that, which if you were a white working class guy, in the 1700s, that is an extraordinary amount of freedom to suddenly have.
Right.
But like, people think Americans, Canadians, Australians, all kinds of, particularly from English-speaking countries, but not only, who have this idea of the UK as this sort of magical place where weirdos are accepted, and it's okay to be like intellectual, and it's okay to be a bit, and that's like, that's sort of true depending on who you are, but it's not. You've seen Doctor Who, or you know of Doctor Who. I believe you like dated some Doctor Who fans. So like,
oh yes,
like Doctor Who is like your neurodivergent hero, right? But it's also, I've noticed that countries tend to make heroes out of whatever is brave in their country. Like, so many British heroes are like, you know, intellectually like daring and different. And that's they break all the social rules. Whoa, they're so weird. And that's what's brave. Whereas in America, what's brave
it's
is
brave to actually break them.
Yeah, it's America is just there's a fundamental violence, like an at-home violence, rather than, you know, history's imperial violence. You guys have in a different way, but there's a basic violence to American culture which just isn't. I think it's partly an island culture thing. It's like when you have you always have so many people very close together. Like most island nations, Japan, Iceland, are kind of a bit, we have rules so people don't tear each other to bits all the time.
Well, that was, when you said that, I did think of when I was in Iceland, and I think I spoke of this on another one of our episodes. I might have, that it was like that my friends were very concerned about me, that I was concerned about, say, walking alone at night or things like that. And they were like, what are you worried about? Like, what do you think is going to happen? And I'm like, murder. And they're like, why would someone murder you walking at night? And I was just like,
you are also
that's an
from Los Angeles.
extremely valid question. Yeah, I was like, valid. Like, why am I accepting this culture where like that is something that I think about on a regular basis? Whereas like, I think about, you know, the population, they're like, of course, it's not idealized. That's not the right word. It's like, it's not that nothing happens there, but it's like, there's a certain amount of like, well, we're the only people here. And so if we do something like pew pew each other, that's going to go very poorly. And we actually should probably get along because we're on this very, very windy, cold island.
Yeah. And honestly, and like, I've been spending a lot of time lately, I'm not going to go on an hour special interest rant. I've been spending a lot of time in the Nordic countries. I'm currently dating a Norwegian. But also, like, I know a lot of Swedish people, and there's a Scandinavian ethos which is similar, but it's not the same as the British thing at all. Actually, here's something you should link. They have this thing called the Jante law, which is, it was written as satire in like the 1920s. It's like 10 laws that are meant to define how we think as a culture, you know, the Scandinavians. But it's sort of become, it's not really a joke anymore. It's the law of Jante. Here's wiki, thank you. A code of conduct originating in fiction, now used colloquially to denote a social attitude of disapproval towards expressions of individuality and personal success. I'll read you some of them. Actually, no, they're short. I'll read you them all. You are not to think that you are anything special. And the translation of you is specifically you as opposed to us, the community. So you're not to think that you are as good as we are. We includes you, but you're not to think that collective. Like number 3, you're not to think that you are smarter than we are. You're not to imagine yourself better than we are. You're not to think you know more than we do. You're not to think you are more important than we are. You're not to think that you are good at anything. You are not to laugh at us. You're not to think that anyone cares about you. You are not to think that you can teach us anything. It's a lot.
Wow.
It's a lot.
Wow.
And, it's there's not the this system is not the same in It's partly because, you know, I write immersive games, and sometimes I've tried to write ones that involve, they do a lot of Downton Abbey stuff, a lot of Jane Austen stuff, and they really think they understand the class system, and mostly they really don't, and it's hilarious. In kind of a lovely way. It's just like, oh, you think there's no, babe, it's not like that. It's not like that.
Nope.
Yeah, it's, but this, again, there's a geography thing. Look, there's a culture of everybody has to huddle up for the winter, because if you're outside the group in the winter, you're going to die. They don't really have homeless people at all. They have the welfare system to do it, because homeless people just die in the winter.
Exactly.
And the culture of what isn't socially acceptable. This is the next thing I'm writing about, actually. I want to do an article just called Autism in the English. It's very...
Well, when you were reading those, like, basically the laws, and originally I heard them in my head as the Yenta laws, and I was just like, I'm like, the laws of gossip? Like, what?
Well,
yeah. But I thought I was, they were percolating, and I noticed I was having like a big reaction to some of them. And what I thought about was that, like, in a way, like, the individual is a reflection of the collective and vice versa. And so in a way, they have a lot to teach one another. Like, there's an interplay between individual experience and collective experience. But it's like, to only value one over the other, I think, like, does a disservice. And so I was like, oh, that's actually really interesting when the one about, like, you don't have anything to teach us, essentially. And I was just like, oh, but both have a lot to teach each other.
Yes.
And, like, I see it more as like a dynamic, or like there's dynamism
100%.
between the two of them. And so I was like, oh, that's really interesting to think about, like, what benefits from when you have a collective like that, but also what might get lost if you have a collective like that. And so I was like, oh.
I think this is one of the big questions of human culture, because we are, okay, do you want to hear my theory? Because I don't think I've said it on this pod before, and I'm trying to work out how to write about it. So
yes, please.
I might take a drink before this, but it's about collectivism and cultural evolution, which is this thing I'm very into at the moment. So cultural evolution is broadly the study of, more or less what it sounds like, of how culture evolves, but how culture shapes and is shaped by human beings. Because, I mean, Richard Dawkins is one of the most famous theorists of this, but he doesn't quite get into it. So the thing that sets human beings apart from other ape life forms that they've studied in terms of learning ability is ability to imitate. Like, it's one of the first things from a very young age that humans are unbelievably good at. Like there's no comparison at all with, like, a 2-year-old, like a baby monkey and a baby person. And one of the things that we're good at, generally speaking, is we'll imitate things before we know why.
Yes.
And I'm sure, and that's the Yanta law. We humans, and I've been reading some fascinating books, and one of them is called, it's not a very amazing title, it's called The Story of Our Success. And this is basically about how, like, culture is encoded, and how one of the things the reasons we are a successful species is we work as a collective in ways that really no other large animal does.
Right.
And culture is part of this. And language is part of this. And it means that basically we can transmit through culture an amount of knowledge, expertise, and learning that no individual or 10 individuals could possibly learn in a lifetime. It means that you and me can have our expertise and we're using a computer. We don't need to know how to take a computer out from the inside. Like, I've upset a couple of hacker people I know from saying that, but we really don't. And I know those people, so if it ever comes to it, they can probably do it for me. I'm sorry. So we transmit knowledge from generation to generation, and part of that is habit and custom. And particularly, really up until very recently, quite a lot of our survival, like, depended on a basic level on being able to accept certain things without asking why. For example, one of my favorite examples that this guy gives is there's a nation where they hunt caribou, and the way that they figure out where they're going to hunt caribou the next day is they take a caribou horn and they hold it over the fire and they follow the pattern of cracks. And it turns out that caribou, I think it's called the stochastic learners, that caribou as a herd animal are incredibly good at picking up on any possible pattern in how predator animals are going to track them. So, of course, over time, the number one most efficient way to hunt caribou is to randomize it. And that's what the horn does. So actually, it turns, and I would not be surprised if, like, most instances where augury, like fortune telling, reading tea leaves, reading egg birds, most places where you just had to sort of accept that that's part of the culture, it turns out that what you actually needed was a randomization engine. And for most of human history, we haven't known why that worked. You just sort of had to accept that it did. But this is what I'm thinking, and it's where I want to go. And I'm reading a lot of papers, and I'm enough of a journalist that I can call this my work rather than a mental breakdown.
Good reframe.
But like, look, so humans, we need to learn, transmit culture, specialize as well. But like, we don't evolve. We evolve and change. We don't evolve and change enough unless you can't have everyone just accept that it's the caribou horn just because.
Right.
You have to have some people who will go, well, does the size of it matter? Do we need do we need this at all? We have to have people who are kind of in some ways immune to social pressure, peer pressure, who don't mirror it in the same way. Like, maybe you shouldn't have everyone like that, but you need to have those people. And, actually in the same book, he talks about neurodivergent people in history as sometimes being like, local wise people or, shamans. I think he's like, I always get a bit suspicious when like white authors write about shamans, but it's
it does get a little Burning Man.
Yeah, oh my god, yeah. Like, talk about like, oh my god, but like, we have white shamans in the UK as well. Like that guy, when you're imagining the white shaman guy, this is like, we have him here.
There's Paisley. Like, there's Paisley involved.
Yeah,
there's
Paisley, and for some reason, a leather jacket but no shirt.
Yeah. That smells like you've taken a bath in it 20 years ago.
He will neg you badly.
Yes. But in the name of polyamory.
Yes. Oh my God. You've met Awful David also. Yeah, we have that guy. Awful David. He's not like my ex-husband is called David. He was not like, I don't want to transduce the guy that he was a different kind of David, but like Awful David, who was like just was this spectre at various parts. Oh my God. Once he was, and this is a British guy. The last party I was at with him, he was like, there was some stupid exercise where we had to invent new words, and he said like, yeah, can anybody come up with this word for, just feeling like, you don't have to like really, consider people in the same way. Like, you're just sort of free of like, the burden of other people's expectations. And I said privilege, and he got really upset.
I was like, I think we call that being an asshole. I don't know.
Yeah, on the subject of which, like, yeah. Anyway, so the theory, white shamans aside, the theory is that sort of neurodivergent people are, there's already like sort of crack theories about ADHD people as hunters, right? You can spot things, pattern spotters, which is I think it's true. With pattern matching skills tend to be better in some ways, but I think there is an evolutionary advantage in having not everybody react to social cues the same way. And also, partly, and this is just a me thing, this is from like, this is deeply citation needed. The thing that seems like one of the hallmarks of autism and ADHD, which is not always talked about as a symptom, because, diagnosable symptoms tend to be the symptoms that like cause problems for other people. Right. But like, one of the hallmarks is, it's not just we want to learn the thing, like we have to tell you the thing. We have to tell it to you. It's, not just but to transmit new knowledge. It's like,
yes,
we just want to grab and we just want to explain it to you right now, whether or not you know us, whether or not we've you're in the corner at a party, you're not, like, I've been this person. I think one of the good things is that, I don't know about you, but I also enjoy receiving the knowledge. I'm like, come info dump with me. It's your turn.
I love a good info dump. Like, it doesn't even matter, like, whether it's my special interest, their special interest, mutual, totally new special interest. I get so excited when someone is excited about a topic.
Yes,
like that excitement is contagious. And then also I love I get to learn a new thing. Yes. And so, like, I'm like, oh, great. I get to share an excitement and I get to learn a new thing. Fantastic.
The word I'm trying to make this word happen for this is metafixation. So it's like, it's not my fixation, but like, I have a couple of close friends who are so into Taylor Swift. They're so into Taylor Swift. Like, I can take or leave Taylor Swift, honestly. But I know quite a lot about Taylor Swift lore because I have friends who are into that. And I enjoy listening to them, like, random. I know a lot about mosses.
Well, it was much like you were speaking of LARP, and though I have my one LARP participation was that I was an NPC in a day LARP. An ex of mine brought me to it, and I basically just played the ukulele at people when they came up to talk to me, and I was just there for prognostication and ukulele. And being that I had no idea what was going on, I was the random generator, and so that was
great. Randomness generator.
I was like, this is great.
Every LARP needs a Pam.
Exactly. I was the personality hire for that event, and it was great. So it was very much, what you were speaking to. There's the, like, from the developmental psychology approach, like, that mirroring and imitation is actually critical to our survival. So, like, we are hardwired for that.
Yep.
Like, our social smile begins anywhere between 3 and 6 months. Like, but we don't know why we're smiling. It's when our caregivers smile at us. However, that's actually one of the markers of neurodivergence, is that we do not always consistently have the social smile. And so what's interesting is we're actually very good at mimicking people, like, when it's strange to say, like, on command, but it's like consciously, like, we can consciously mimic people often quite well. And sometimes actually unconsciously, where I think I talked in a previous podcast also about, like, when I'm anywhere around someone who has a different accent than me, I have to think really hard about not accidentally mimicking their accent. Yeah. And so it's like, there's that built in, but that's almost like echolalia as opposed to a social skill. And so there's some social skills that I'm really good at mirroring because I got the hyper empathy portion of the ADHD and the touch of the TISM, where it's like, you don't just feel your feelings, you feel everyone's feelings. You're just in a feeling miasma. And so it can be very confusing because I'll have felt all the feelings, but also not necessarily know what the social cue was for the feelings. And so in some ways it makes me think about it differently than I would say someone who just automatically does the social cue. And so what you're saying struck me, that I was just like, yes, that's part of cultural evolution and social evolution, to, I would say, express curiosity, not hostility, but curiosity about a social norm or curiosity about something. However, if someone, like, it brings me back to what I was saying at the start, and what really struck me in the podcast that you sent is that if someone says something is harmful, like, for instance, asking, why do we follow the caribou cracks? Is it the kind of horn? Is it the heat of the fire? Is it you're questioning, you're offering curiosity, whereas you're not like, fuck that horn, and just like smashing the horn for no reason, being like, it's because I don't believe in caribou horn augury. And so, like, there's a big difference.
Probably there was someone, I don't know, there's a lot of, like, there are theories, and I'm sure there are, like, theories by neurodivergent people like us who might want to, be like, there's a reason for us. But, like, I think a lot of political philosophers, which is kind of like my area, reading about these, there are a lot of, I've been listening to podcasts and reading stuff, and people. Well, it was actually the one on Jeremy Bentham, and David Runciman, who's a writer I adore. He says, look, obviously, we don't want to diagnose people from the past with diagnoses of this century. It's not. It's historically lazy, and people would have thought about this in different way, different from. On the other hand, this guy. Like,
And diversity is advantageous across species. It's advantageous like across everything. So thinking about neurodiversity and about like what we consider now diagnosis, like it describes just different variations on like brain and nervous system development that's actually very advantageous for species, like including ours. Because it's like, say you have people who do not question anything and do not express curiosity, everything will then just stay the same. And if something changes and there's actually an adaptation that would be beneficial and no one notices it, like, there goes the species. So,
and it's a lot of like people associate, scientists and mathematicians more with like abilitism, but we're now coming to realize that there's a lot of people who like work in philosophy, work in history, like people who kind of think for a living about other people, and also activists. Because like, I mean, look, I came up as like a feminist writer, and one of the things I always sort of felt a bit weird about before I realized what was going on was that I would say things on twitter.com or in other places that seemed to me obvious and that everybody would benefit from having this information, which I assumed they probably had already. And then people would say to me, oh my God, you're so brave. I would never say something like that. And then I'd be like, firstly, oh no, I've done it. Like, but also like, it's not, honestly, finally now in my late 30s, I've sort of, having been through some trauma, I'm finally slightly more shy to say things that might be called confrontational. But really, like for most of my life, despite a lot of pushback, it really just hasn't occurred to me to be very afraid of things that, and like, it's not brave. I'm not actually, I mean, I'm oblivious, but I've not gone through some process to be this incredible free person. And it just, like, I got that, like, there's other problems involved in this.
Well, and that's what you were saying about, in a way, like being weird, like violating a social norm versus causing harm. Because if you're sharing information, that might be violating the social norm of like, oh, you're not supposed to say the quiet part out loud. But that's very different than causing harm of like in the article that you wrote about like exposing yourself to other people or repeatedly bringing up sexual things when someone has said, I'm uncomfortable, or when someone has left the room, or things like that, where it's like, those are pretty well-defined social norms, not because they're arbitrary, but because someone has said this causes me harm.
Yeah.
Like, and so that's very different.
Yeah. And like, I hate it, but some social norms are there for a reason. And you do have to, like, you see this, obviously it's not new anymore, but this sort of, this idea from the manosphere, from, and particularly the American manosphere, but the ideal of freedom, kind of like Awful David. Let's bring it back to Awful David, is that the idea of freedom, like, is that you get to do whatever you want forever, and anybody saying you need to go to bed on time or you can't grab her boobs is like they're oppressing you. All social norms are wrong, apart from the ones that relate to your own comfort, obviously. Like, and that ain't it. Like, some social norms are pretty oppressive, sure. Like, there are some that are like there to defend other people from harm and like be pro-social in an active way. And I think I'm right about what the difference is. You list me the social norms, I think that I would probably be correct in going, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. But that's just me. Like, I bet every single person
and also getting feedback, like you said, where it's like receiving. I was talking to someone about the concept of like that some people, when you give them negative feedback, they interpret that as bullying. That they're like, you're being mean to me, you're bullying me, you're, things like that. And even like, obviously this was not like, an influencer. This was actually an interaction between my nieces. They're 15 and 12. And my younger niece, like had changed her schedule and we were picking her up from summer camp. It was during the week that I was taking care of both of them. So I was cosplaying as a single parent. And she, I'm still tired. They're wonderful, but also mad respect to parents out there. I'm an auntie for a reason. But like, we were picking her up and she had actually wanted to stay half an hour later than the time we had agreed because they were doing an activity at the summer camp she was at.
Yeah.
However, she doesn't have a phone. She does have an iPad, but she didn't have it with her. And so she didn't call me. She didn't call her older sister, like didn't text anyone. So we show up and she's like, oh, can you come back in half an hour? And my older niece was like, well, no, that really sucks. Like, we were picking you up at this time. And she's just like, well, but my plans changed. Like, I want to stay. And my older niece rightly said, but that inconveniences me and Aunt Pam. And what my younger niece said was, stop it, you're being mean. And I said, hey, stick around at camp and we're going to chat about it after. And the chat that we had was, that her older sister was not, in fact, being mean. She might have been pointing it out in a blunt way, but that it was true. If you change your plans and don't tell other people, that does inconvenience other people. So I said, what tool can we have to help you with that? Because I know you don't have a phone. So she was like, well, I didn't have anyone's number. And I said, well, why don't we write down some of the important phone numbers of the grownups in your life that might be helping you out? We can laminate that card and stick it in your bag. I was just like, that way you can use someone's phone nearby. You've got a resource. Because I was just like, I forgive you. I understand. Of course you wanted to stay. It was like your last day. They were doing an activity. I was like, totally get that. And she was very amenable to that. We collected the phone numbers. But I did point out to her that her initial reaction was one of shame, of like, I've done something wrong, so I'm going to say my older sister is being mean. And so I was like, oh, okay, we're going to nip that in the bud and be like, okay, let's hear the feedback. The feedback is like, of course you want to stay. I totally understand. But also it is inconsiderate to ask someone to pick you up and then ask them to sit around wherever for like half an hour. So I was like, okay, where's the balance in here? And so I was like, okay, how do I talk to her about it? Because I was like, now is not the moment. She's activated. Her older sister's pissed off. So I took her older sister to go and have like a snack nearby. Like, we just went to a coffee shop and hung out and she was fine. But yeah, it was like, how do I get like this 12-year-old to understand if someone gives you feedback, they're not attacking you. Like, that was valid feedback.
That's a lesson that I feel like most adults either don't get or don't internalize enough. So like proper top aunting.
I was also like, of course I get it if you don't have a phone, but then how do we solve that problem? How do I help you with that? And so she was all excited to then collect all the numbers, and she likes my handwriting. So she liked that, like, I wrote it for her, but I was like, how do we give you a better resource for that? So next time that happens and you want to leave at a different time, you can tell someone.
Yeah.
And so, and so she was very amenable to that.
The difference between being inconvenienced and being harmed, and the difference between being given feedback and being bullied. And I think it's like that confusion, like, and we can talk about this in another pod and should, like, that confusion often comes down as much to who the person is socially, as in like what category they occupy.
Right.
I mean, like, classically, it's a lot of men will take it, and women will take feedback from men far more easily than they take it from women. Like, women can say exactly the same thing, and they come across as aggressive rather than assertive.
Oh, you're being bitchy.
Yeah, it's it like social people get to violate social norms to differing degrees, and this is the English class system. It's not just in the UK. It's not just men who get to break social rules, although it mostly is. Like, if you look through, there's this brilliant book called The Book of English Eccentrics. It's from like the mid-Victorian age, and you look through it, and it's basically just a book of autistic people who are lucky enough to have servants. Like,
I was going to say that had financial privilege, and that was something that Erica brought up in the episode. That it was really fascinating talking to them, because I thought that we were going to talk more about the creative process that they go through, but so much of it was actually about what enables their creative process to even happen. And so much of what they were saying was just, it's money. Like, if you have money to throw at neurodivergence, if you have money that people can help you with your scheduling, with the logistics, with all of the things that we end up kind of like devoting our resources to and then not having any juice left for anything else. Like, if you have that, that is actually that is your creative process. You have to have I think of like the description of Nabokov's wife, where it's like she was. I was just
bring up Laura Nabokov. Yeah, I love how we think the same with Laura Nabokov. Everybody needs one, like somebody who will make of it. Or let's on a like rare equality basis, Leonard Woolf.
Yeah.
And
I mean, Godwin. You just saw. I was gonna say, Godwin, and you just saw my boyfriend come in with, like saving the day with the Wi-Fi, saying like, I've emailed you about a laptop stand so you don't have to use a chaos pile. Like,
oh
my
God.
entire morning was thrown off because he had his annual physical, so I did not wake up to my partner making breakfast and reminding me, hey, look at the note card, because I made myself a note card with my morning routine on it. Like, hey, look at your card, so you do your stretches and you do like, because it's so like co-regulatory having him there. But also, like, he's asked me, how can I help you? It's not like I'm like, let me assign this to you. He said, how can I help you? Because then he gets the gift of a much better regulated partner.
Everyone needs that, particularly like people who work independently, but everybody needs that, not just neurodivergent people. And it's kind of the modern tragedy, and the tragedy in general, is that neurodivergent people often need that slightly more, that aspect of care, and are often less likely to get it. Like neurodivergent women are significantly more likely to be unpartnered, not by choice.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Things that have likely to have fewer friends, and neurodivergent men, like neurodivergent people, are more likely to be socially isolated, and we need more, in some ways, more care and help with the social aspect.
And it was hard also to learn to take in that care. Like, we had been friends prior to our relationship starting, but there were moments where he would offer care and I would feel really uncomfortable accepting it because I wasn't used to that level of someone considering me. And he had the same response, in fact, to like me offering emotional attunement in ways that, as someone who is socialized as a cis man, like, he also was not used to. And so at first he was like, am I being burdensome in a way? And I felt the same way about some of my things that he like stepped in. And so it was interesting seeing two like different flavors of neurodivergent and also socialized as different genders, and like took in that socialization. Because also I have several friends who very much are like, the gender socialization didn't take, the autism overruled it. And so whereas both of us have just that little sprinkling that we're like, oh, interesting, our pattern recognition as well as our justice sensitivity and also sensory stuff off the chart. But also both of us got the hyper empathy as opposed to the opposite. And so it's really fascinating that both of us kind of got the message of, the things that I am helping you with are too much. And so for so long, I like met the needs of other partners, and I don't begrudge my former partners for not meeting these needs, because I just presupposed that those were things that were too much for someone else to do.
I begrudge your former partners. But I'm allowed to.
You're like, I will fight them.
Yes.
And you're buff now, so they better watch out.
I know some of those guys. We can't talk about the poncho incident on the pod, really. Or can we?
Oh no, the poncho incident. I feel like the poncho incident is very awful Dave coded.
So it's like a former partner of Pam's happened to, who we'd been discussing that day, happened to match with me, and I think it was Field. It was either Field,
it was either Field or OkCupid.
It might be OkCupid actually. And it's like, I was like, Pam, is this the guy you got like rushed? I think I was in your house. It was and I rushed over, and then you were like, "That's my poncho he's wearing in that picture." I'm like, "We're gonna get that poncho back for you. We're gonna get it back."
I was like, not only is that my ex, but that's my poncho. That's also the most Californian thing. I am the most California person you know.
Yeah. Ponchos are wonderful. Ponchos are fantastic, and people should be brave enough to wear them.
They're wearable. They're wearable blankets. They're so good.
What is it? Mighty Boosh. It's like nobody can be unhappy in a poncho.
It is very difficult to be unhappy in a poncho. You could put in the effort.
Yeah, like generally speaking, we don't like. Pam has decided not to resent former partners for not being, like able to like give care in the same way. Is that what you were saying?
Well, like
I'm trying
in
to
some
reflect.
ways, I feel like good reflection. I feel like in some ways there's a part of there's a part of me that does want to resent it, but there's another part of me that also recognizes that everyone's capacity is different, and also that it's the whole thing of like I can forgive, but I don't forget, and I can be compassionate, but like from over here, where I'm like, oh, like you, in for whatever reason, either aren't capable or unwilling to do these things. And
Yep.
so that's not on me to say you must do these things or else you're bad. It just is like, oh, then that's not a person that I should be around in that capacity because that's not a match.
Yeah.
And so, like, there is, I would say, there's also a difference between that and like harm caused. Like I've
Yeah.
only had one ex who had said specifically that they cause harm on purpose. And so that I don't forgive. But the others, it's just kind of, where I'm like, oh, well, you're just kind of hapless. And so in a way, I would prefer you to be otherwise. And I think it would benefit your relationships, but also it's not on me to police that or, control that. It's on me to be like, okay, what do I want my proximity to be to someone that isn't able to either see these parts of me or meet these parts of me? That I do give people a chance. I well explain. And I'm like, okay, if I've explained something, if I've demonstrated something, if I've given chances and someone hasn't fulfilled them, it's kind of like, well, that's sad, but also it's kind of like a clean, okay, like you have shown me this is where you're at and I have to accept that.
And like thinking about what I'm thinking, I've had lots of different thoughts while you've been saying this. And like first I was like, people should try harder. But also like there's an aspect of it. I was like, are we just being too nice to men in straight relationships, straight coded relationships? But also like I know and have been in a lot of relationships with like mixed neurodivergence where, for example, like so I have the double threat, the autism and the ADHD diagnoses. And I found that in generally speaking, whether it's with partners or friends, my autistic traits are really not that much of a problem for my ADHD friends, for my pure ADHD friends. They're like, oh, are you having a meltdown? Okay, what do you need?
Yeah.
But for like my purely autistic friends who really just need quiet and like my ADHD traits can be a problem there, and that's nobody's fault, and like and like them wanting to like needing that quiet, that's not them being controlling necessarily, that's not like them having different needs, but also my not being able to organize everybody's schedule like women's are supposed to do. That's not how I identify, or like my just being all over the place. That's not I'm not being inconsiderate on purpose. I'm not breaking gender rules on purpose, although sometimes I am, but just not in that way. And I've seen a few relationships like that, among friends where like just the different neurodivergent traits not matching, and that's not anybody being. That's just really unfortunate. And sometimes it's just some people are able to work around it, and sometimes it's just.
I like how one of the therapists that was on my team, because I did her training hours and now she has her own practice. The way that she framed it was sad but clean, where it's like it's sad when there's that mismatch. And I've seen that too, where it's like I've noticed that like there are fellow neurodivergent people that are just of slightly different flavors that I understand very well, but that I know would be incompatible with me in, say, a long-term romantic relationship, or like a close or like a domestic friendship or something like that, where it's like I'm like, oh, okay, I can see how this wouldn't mesh. And then there's others where I could see where that might be a great mesh for that kind of relationship, but wouldn't, say, be a good creative collaboration relationship. And things like that, where it's like I can see kind of how those pieces fit together in a way. And so same thing, where I have found that I actually do better with partners who are primarily have more autistic features, because like the way that interacts with my ADHD is great, because my touch of the tism, like mine was diagnosed as like, quote, subclinical, which like I said, I don't really believe in the medical model of this. I think it's just like ways to describe different brains. But like mine was mainly my sensory experience, and what I could describe as like sometimes like social naivete. and that I'm like, why would someone put in the effort into saying things they don't mean with code words? That seems like a waste of time. I'm also not great with social hierarchy, which is why, as we were talking about like earlier, like people who are trying to manipulate others or people who are invested in social hierarchy, like I'm basically kind of like allergic to cults. Like,
that's very useful for Los Angeles. Very useful for Los Angeles.
Deeply. So anyone, when I meet someone that everyone has described as, quote, charismatic, that person generally dislikes me because I am immune to whatever that thing is. Like that thing where they thrive off of in some way, like enchanting you in that way. I'm immune to that enchantment. Like I just am. And I don't see them as lesser or better or anything else. It's because I view them as a fellow person. And so they then feel very seen and do not like that. I have learned, which is fascinating and strange. But yeah, like it's interesting because like the autistic traits that I have are that social naivete. I have the hyper empathy, and all of my sensory stuff is just banana pants. The world is just very loud and smelly and bright all the time. And bleh. But
but again, you do live in Los Angeles. Sorry.
Well, you make a fair point.
I live in Finsbury Park. It's like...
but what I deal really well with is if, say, like my partner is experiencing rigid thinking around something, he's been told in the past that he was being difficult, that he was being annoying or weird. And because of my ADHD, I'm able to see if he's seeing only 2 options, I'm able to see all 17. And I'm also able to be like, to be like, oh, I see how distressed you are, and I can help you through that distress, and I can hold those 17 guys in my head, and I can remind you how safe you are. And so about half an hour later, when you have felt a little more regulated, I can present maybe 2 or 3 of those extra things. So you can see you can see more of the gray area. And so it's like that, like, I'm fine with that. Like, I don't perceive him in that way of being difficult. And then conversely, he's able to narrow things down for me where he's like, would you like this or this? Like, he's really good with providing that structure. And since I trust him, and because I know he has my best interest in mind, he knows me really well. He's known me since we were like 16. So it's like, I know that I can trust him, that if he's presenting me with something, it's in my best interest, and he knows the options that I like. And occasionally he'll present me with 2 options, knowing full well I'm going to choose a secret third thing. And he's okay with that because he already has that schema in his mind. So it's like, it's this good like dovetail. But I struggled with having partners with more ADHD traits because then, though I can hold that structure, it's very taxing for me and very draining.
Yeah.
And then I feel like I'm then in, like you said, that gendered position of holding the calendar, holding the finances, holding like all of those things, which though I can hold them for myself and I can co-hold them with someone, even though I can hold them for 2 people, it stresses
taxing
me to the point that then I can't do the other things that actually I would much prefer to do.
And like too many neurodivergent AFAB people down the centuries have been stuck doing something that they are not good at.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah. And I'm like, just because I can do it.
Bringing it back to the live action role play for one moment. Maybe I told you this, but I filled in playing Percy Shelley at a lot.
You told me.
The Diodati things. But one of the things was, it's a long game, very intense, and I'd already been running it for several days, and my co-writer was like, are you going to be all right with this? And I was like, this is probably the one time in my life where I get to make all of my neurodivergent traits everybody else's problem, like on purpose. So it was fantastic. It was like I was feeling a bit overwhelmed, so I had a tantrum. I went upstairs to have an angry nap, and then I was instantly upset that nobody was coming to check on me. It was great. It was great. I just sort of leaned completely into it. It was like, it was surprisingly easy. Thinking yourself into the head of being like an artist who just doesn't have to self-regulate. The direction was, do not self-regulate. That's everybody else's problem now. You've got servants, and the servants want to play servants. That's what they're here for. So please, like, throw shit, hide under the table. You're a child baby man. But you're brilliant. It's a lot. Yeah.
Wow.
Anyway, on that note, I should go.
Well,
you're a delight.
I send big hearts.
Big love to both of you. I hope to see you soon. See you soon on a pod as well.
I was going to say. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Neuroprovocateurs. Please join us on Substack, where you can find exclusive clips, resources, and community of the neurospicy variety. We are an independent podcast, so know that your support on Substack and beyond means the world to us, quite literally. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to leave us 5 stars and glowing reviews and follow our podcast on your preferred podcast platform so that you can be sure to get each episode the moment it drops, and know that your reviews help us get in front of other people who might also want to listen to this podcast. We are on social media in all of the usual places as Neuroprovocateurs. Thank you again, and excited to see you for our next episode.